Okay, so you know that we are going to go ahead and work on this right here. We'll start with this argument and show that it's invalid. So as I said on the previous slide that I've moved out of the way now, we're going to find substitutions for D, M, and C so that, high up there, might as well make it nice, so that we get a false conclusion and all true premises as we wrote down there. So there are various combinations here of things we can substitute that will make this work, but there are some definite guidelines that we have for following that will give us some good substitutions to make here. Because the thing is, when we make substitutions to make the premises true and the conclusion false, we need to do this in such a way that it's obvious to somebody as simple as I am that those claims are true and the conclusion is false, right? You want to stick with simple things, in other words. Things like dogs, cats, mammals, fish, and the like, so that I don't have to look anything up on the Wikipedia when I'm going to check your answer on the exam. So, for example, in the conclusion here, we might make D stand for mammals, right? And M here could stand for four-legged creatures, okay? Now, you can follow along, by the way, on the PowerPoint slides. I've given you these answers there, but I'll put it on the screen to talk you through this. So when we make those substitutions here for this conclusion, we end up with all mammals are four-legged creatures. And of course, as I'm standing here, I am proof that that is not, in fact, the case, right? By the way, I'll just mention here, this type of thing here, four-legged creature, right? Let's say I told you that all cats are four-legged creatures. In fact, I might do that right now, right? Let's say that C stood for cats. Then we would get here in our premises, all cats are mammals, and that's definitely true, right? We know that. Here we would get all cats are four-legged creatures. Now, some of a darker mindset might observe here that, in fact, there are cats who have, through perhaps an accident or some sort of birth defect, been born or exist without four legs, right? And that is, of course, true. However, when we're talking about all cats here are such and such, we're talking about in general, right? The species known as cats has four legs. That's their nature, we might say. So, in fact, both of these premises are true, and that conclusion is false. This is the kind of thing you want to do. You want to make simple substitutions that will give you that combination. And the reason for that is because, right, remember, this is an argument form that goes back to the argument about collies, dogs, and mammals. Well, if you suspected that this was an invalid argument, and I would think after taking this class that would be something that would come more readily to you than perhaps before, you suspect it's an invalid argument, and yet you want to show the person offering it that it is invalid, what you could say is, well, wait a minute. By that line of thinking, by that way of thinking, right, in terms of the collies, dogs, and mammals example, you could start with premises, right? It's the same way to think. You could start with the premise that all cats are mammals, right? And the person offering this argument originally would say, sure. And all cats are four-legged creatures, and they'd say yes. But the same pattern then as the original argument about collies, dogs, and mammals would result in a conclusion here, once we make those substitutions, that all mammals are four-legged creatures. And then the person would recognize, oh, and of course that's not true. Well, when you recognize that you can have true premises and a false conclusion, anytime you recognize that an argument allows for that possibility, that is, by definition, an invalid argument. Because valid arguments, right, what they do is they say if you have true premises, that guarantees you will have a true conclusion. But here, clearly, there is no such guarantee given this argument form. So that's one set of substitutions that works quite nicely for this one. I will tell you that coming up with these substitutions, it's a trial and error process. And sometimes you come up with substitutions that make the conclusion false, but then when you go to the premises to make them true, you can't seem to find something that will work, and that will happen. When that does happen, when your first try doesn't work, in other words, you have a couple options. Sometimes all you need to do is rearrange the terms here. That might work. Sometimes, though, you have to start over, start with a new topic, that kind of thing. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for the fact that when you work on these and then you look up your answers, wherever that answer key might be, what you come up with in terms of your substitutions will not always, in fact, I would say will probably not usually match the answer key. That doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, because there are many correct answers to the problem. But you just always want to double check. Do I have all true premises and a false conclusion with whatever substitutions that you're making here? One other reminder here is that, again, make your substitutions simple, but also make them dealing with things that are publicly available. In other words, don't make reference to your personal pet. My pet is a cat or something like this. Because, of course, I don't know your pet. I don't know who you might be, or that you have a such and such a pet. Always make sure that these terms are referring to information that's publicly available. All right, so let's go ahead and turn to the hypothetical syllogism now. And I just want to emphasize, when you're dealing with a hypothetical syllogism and you're trying to come up with substitutions to make, as we know, all true premises and a false conclusion, you have to make sure you're substituting here for the T and the C entire propositions, not types of things as we saw up here, but entire propositions. Here's the other thing, though. I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to give you a tip here. To make good substitutions that are going to make the premises true and the conclusion false, what you want to do is you can start by identifying your favorite dead celebrity. Sounds like a strange setup or a setup for a joke, but that's the key here. Start with your favorite dead celebrity to show an argument like this is, in fact, invalid. Okay, so whoever it is, I'll just put down, as you can see from the PowerPoint slides, Elvis is dead. So I'm talking about, the Elvis or the original Elvis or whatever you might understand that to be, but Elvis Presley is dead. Then for the antecedent of this conditional statement, you want to choose a method of killing someone, first of all, that is 100% effective. So for example, you don't want to say Elvis was shot, because people survive getting shot all the time. People survive even getting shot in the head. So you want to make sure that whatever type of death you're going to be talking about here, and by the way, this is as gruesome as the class will get. Whatever type of way of killing somebody you're talking about here, it has to be 100% effective. For my money, what works best here is beheading, right? It is 100% effective, and so you can use that, for example. But I also want to say that whatever way of killing somebody off here that you're going to deal with, it also has to be a way that they didn't actually die. This is another reason why beheading works nicely, right? As long as you stay away from particular kings of France, there are very few people, especially celebrities, who have been beheaded. And so what you want to do here is you say, Elvis was beheaded. And so what we get, plugging all this in, is if Elvis was beheaded, then Elvis is dead. Now that's absolutely true, right? If he was beheaded, then he is dead. Definitely true. Second premise, Elvis is dead. Also definitely true. Conclusion, Elvis was beheaded? Well, no, he wasn't, right? Drugs, I believe. But it certainly was not, he did not die as a result of losing his head. And so you can see once again that we've got all true premises and a false conclusion for sure, very clearly. And that shows that the original argument dealing with tort and corporate power and whatnot, which we don't understand, it isn't clearly invalid. Well, it has to be invalid, right? Because it's the same structure of an argument here that would lead us from true premises, clearly true premises, to a clearly false conclusion, right? So when you're dealing with hypothetical syllogisms, this is the way to go. Pick your favorite dead celebrity, plug that, note that they're dead, and plug that into the consequent, and then come up with a way that would kill them 100% of the time, plug that into your antecedent here, and everything will work very nicely to get you the pattern that you want to have. One other tip here, and please understand what I mean by this. You want to make sure that the celebrity you're talking about is actually dead. Not that you want to do anything about that, of course, but in other words, just because you haven't heard of somebody in a long time, that doesn't mean that they're dead, right? So make sure you know somebody in particular that you are sure is dead.